We're all at different places when it comes to the kinds of technology we use right now. But I think no matter what, let's agree on this. Technology is really cool. It gives us access to so many people, so much information, and so many opportunities almost immediately. I mean, technology has definitely made my life better. 5 years ago, my husband and I took a road trip from Atlanta all the way to California and back. And the whole thing was made so much easier with technology. We had the directions for everywhere we were going with map apps, and that was a big deal because in 10 days, we drove almost 7,000 miles. And guess what else? Everywhere we stayed was booked online. We camped out at the Grand Canyon, booked it online. We slept in a school bus in San Francisco, booked it online. And all the things we did were things we had read about online. Did you know the largest urban colony of bats in the entire country live under a bridge in Austin, Texas, and you can watch them fly out at night by the millions? And did you know that out in California, in the middle of the Colorado desert, there's this huge art installation called Salvation Mountain, where this one man built a small mountain out of his own hands and painted the whole thing with Bible verses? It was wild, and we wouldn't have made it there without technology. Our whole crazy adventure was sponsored by technology. So it's pretty safe to say that all that access to technology has definitely made our lives better and easier. But I think we can also agree that in other ways, technology has made our lives a lot more complex. I mean, think about it. Technology is awesome when you're using it to write your paper, but when your computer crashes and you lose everything, that is not great, you guys. Technology can be a lot of fun when you're playing Xbox with your friends, or when you're on Instagram sharing photos from your weekend, but when you see photos from a party you weren't invited to, that's kind of a letdown. Technology isn't so bad when you're innocently clicking links, but when you happen to land on a page that's R-rated, yikes, right? Not where you plan to be. Now, we're in the middle of a series called None of Your Business. And in this series, we've been talking about one of the things that most middle schoolers, and maybe even most people, think you probably shouldn't be talking about at church: sex. Last week, though, we learned that sex is actually a really good and powerful thing that God created. And sexual thoughts and desires and acts are all totally normal God-designed parts of being a human. They're all good things when we follow God's plan for them. And because of that, we want to make sure that all of us understand them and use them in a way that honors God. Now, some of you have probably never been in a situation where you had to decide what you were going to do when it comes to sex. Some of you might be grossed out or really uncomfortable at the idea of it, and some of you may even feel like you're just trying to understand it. And because of all that, it's easy for most middle schoolers to not want to talk about sex. It's easy for you to just tune it out and think, this does not apply to me. But what you're not realizing is that sex is about so much more than just a physical act. And that's why this conversation applies to everyone in this room. Even if you're not actually having sex, you may still have thoughts and desires and questions about sex. Some of you may even be coming across sexual things when you use technology. In fact, one of the biggest ways sex can show up in our lives is through technology. Now, technology has a way of giving us access to things related to sex, sometimes without us even looking for it, like those not so appropriate photos that showed up on your Explore page on Instagram, or those nude videos or pictures that someone sent you on Snapchat. I mean, what about those videos you stumbled upon on YouTube, or that new show with that scene that you didn't know would be there, or those super sexualized advertisements that pop up when you're browsing? I mean, we all know how easy it is to come across things online that are sexual. And sometimes we go looking for it ourselves because we're curious, and other times it finds us. But either way, it exposes us to sex in ways that maybe we're just not prepared for. We're gonna get more into that next week. But today, I wanna talk about how technology has a way of making us believe that behind our screens, we can act in ways we would never act in real life. Here's what I mean. Sometimes without even realizing it, we use our computers and phones as a shield to hide behind. When we pick up our phones or get on social media or open up our laptop, suddenly our shield is up. It makes us feel like what we're experiencing through technology isn't real life. That behind the shield, we can say or do or act in ways that we wouldn't in our everyday lives. With our technology shield up, We can send that message on Snapchat asking for that photo that we would never ask for in person. We can send someone a DM on Instagram using words we would never say to that person's face. We can post that photo of ourselves in a pose or an outfit that we think will get the most likes or comments, something we would never do if others were in the room with us. For some reason, it sometimes feels like what happens online isn't real. What we do behind our screens doesn't feel like reality. And because it doesn't feel like real life, we don't take it seriously. We don't think the rules about sex or sexuality apply there. Here's the problem with that. It is real life. I mean, this shield, it's not real. And just because you're not face to face with the people on the other side of your screen doesn't make it any less powerful. Because the truth is, what happens on the screen doesn't stay on the screen. Who you are on that screen is a part of the real you. And what happens on that screen is real life. That shield that you thought you had up, it doesn't actually exist. And because of that, how you use technology has the potential to impact your real life, especially when it comes to sex. See, sometimes technology tempts us to act in ways we don't normally act. And even though you aren't actually a part of sexual activity in person, the way you use technology may be opening the door for you to use sex in a way that isn't healthy or a part of God's plan. Trust me, it still affects you, even if it doesn't seem like it will. So right about now, you're probably thinking, how do you really know any of this? I mean, the Bible doesn't say anything about what you can or can't post or text or what you can or can't say online, and technically, you're right. When God inspired people to write the Bible, they didn't know things like smartphones or Instagram or Snapchat or iPads would exist. But just because the Bible doesn't have the word technology in it doesn't mean it doesn't have wisdom that will help us when it comes to understanding and following God's plan for sex. So even though they weren't writing with things like social media and computers in mind, we can trust that the writers of scriptures were still writing with us in mind, right here and right now. In fact, the Apostle Paul, one of the leaders in the early church, wrote something for us that is true, even if he didn't know anything about smartphones when he wrote it. He said, "Run from sexual sin. No other sin so clearly affects the body as this one does. For sexual immorality is a sin against your own body. Don't you realize that your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit who lives in you and was given to you by God? You do not belong to yourself, for God bought you with a high price, so you must honor God with your body." Paul obviously took sex seriously, but notice he didn't say run from sex. Instead, he said run from sexual sin. Why does that little difference matter? Because sex itself is good. God made it good. You don't need to run from something that was created for your good. But when sex is misused, like outside the context of marriage, the power and consequences are potentially damaging. And that's when it becomes sin. And that, according to Paul, is when we need to start running. Paul also used the phrase sexual immorality here, which means more than just sex. Sexual immorality is when sex is used in any way that's different from how it was designed. It was designed by God to be something that isn't shameful. It was designed to be between two married people as a way for them to know each other completely. So anything that goes against that design is sexual immorality. So here's the point. Sexual sin and sexual immorality are about so much more than sex itself. And Paul told us to run from it because he knew sex used in the wrong way can hurt others and ourselves. And yes, that includes sex access through our technology. One of the dangerous things about technology is that it gives us the opportunity to talk about and get noticed for, or even push the boundaries with sexual things without actually having sex. And that can make it seem like it's not a big deal. Because it's not actual sex with a person in real life, it can feel like a loophole, like a way to play with fire and not actually get burned. It feels less dangerous, almost like a free pass. It's a way to get around this whole sexual sin thing. But according to Paul, that's not the case. And in fact, sexual immorality can be really dangerous. It doesn't get you off the hook at all. It still opens you up to sex in a way that God didn't intend, in a way that is not his best for you. And when Paul talked about sexual immorality, he also talked about it as sexual sin. And sin basically means not following God's plan for our lives. It means that when we use sex outside of God's intention for it, we are missing out on his best for us. We're missing out on this perfect plan that he has for each of us. And I think that's why this passage doesn't just say something like, be careful when it comes to sexual sin. Paul literally said, run from it, because he knew that sin is powerful and that we can be fooled into thinking that it's less powerful in some situations, that it isn't a big deal, that not following God's plan isn't so bad. But it is a big deal, both in real life and in technology. In all situations that aren't how God designed it, it will cause you to miss out on God's best. It can lead to hurt and pain in both you and the other person, now and later. I mean, if Paul wrote this today with technology in mind, he might have said something like, run from that desire to post the Instagram picture that draws attention to you sexually. Run from the temptation to leave that sexual comment on someone else's post. Run from those messages asking you for photos or videos that are sexual in nature. Run from sending those messages. Now, let me pause here to make something really clear. If you've received sexual photos or videos or words that you did not want or did not ask for, you aren't sinning sexually. You aren't responsible for other people's actions and words, and you aren't sinning sexually when you get texted an unwanted photo or accidentally click on that pornographic video, or when you happen to read a comment that's definitely R-rated. You are held responsible only for what you do with those things after you receive them. You're responsible for whether you delete those photos or videos or forward them onto your friends or secretly save them. What you do with them is your opportunity to follow God's plan for sex, or not. So remember, run from anything that invites sexual things into your life in a way that God did not intend, and sometimes that includes technology. You see, just like sex, technology is good and technology is powerful. It's an amazing invention that we can use for so many cool and awesome things. Technology makes our lives so much easier in so many ways. It opens us up to learning about and connecting with people all over the world. It spreads knowledge, it builds relationships. As a middle schooler, technology can be really freeing. Since you can't drive yet and you don't have total independence from the adults in your lives, technology provides a way for you to make your world so much bigger. But technology also has the power to open us up to sex in ways that can hurt both ourselves and others. And that's why it's so important that we learn how to honor God's intention for sex, even in the digital world. So what does that look like? It means understanding that what happens online is real life. Just because you're behind your screen doesn't mean that your words or actions have any less power. So don't let that screen fool you into thinking that you aren't impacting yourself or someone else negatively when it comes to sex. Because what happens online does not stay online. Now, I think we have to pause and ask ourselves, why? Why am I about to post this picture? Why do I want to write this comment? Why am I going to send that message? If I don't get the reaction or response that I want, how will I feel and why? Before you do whatever it is, stop to consider the intention behind it. Is it to get attention for yourself? To hurt someone else? To give in to your curiosity? I mean, whatever the answer, if it isn't to treat yourself or someone else the way God intended when it comes to sex, then pause and reconsider before you do it. I think we have to run the things we do online through the secret filter. In other words, are the things you're doing and saying and posting online things that you would want to be kept secret from people in your life? If the answer is yes, then you probably need to stop right there and start running the other way, because anything we want kept secret from the people in our lives whose opinions really matter, our parents, our friends, our small group, our coaches, those things probably aren't God's best for us. And while they don't need to be everyone's business, they do need to be somebody's business. Somebody who can help encourage you to avoid the temptation to live in secret behind that screen and instead pursue God's best for you when it comes to sex. Remember, technology is good and technology is powerful. With that in mind, think about this question as you leave. What is one way technology might not be good for me?